Human Rights Commission says it has seen an increase in complaints with equality being the most infringed right in South Africa. South African Human Rights Commissioner Advocate Andre Gaum joins us now to talk a little bit further to this. So 27 years on, Andre, good evening and thank you very much for joining us tonight. South Africa, still the most infringed right is that of inequality.
Yes, that is indeed the case. It is also then followed by complaints about socio-economic rights being violated, as one would expect, as well as unjust administrative action. But unfortunately, the right to equality remains to be the most violated right in terms of the complaints we receive. Many of those complaints also dealing with hate speech, which is, of course, very detrimental to us attempting to create a culture of human rights and to foster social cohesion and nation building. And it's also for that reason that we will later in the year have a summit on racial polarization in our country, and we will specifically also have an inquiry into social cohesion, nation building and unfair discrimination.
Now, Andre, so you're saying more South Africans are coming to the South African Human Rights Commission and complaining to say my rights to equality are being infringed. In what aspects? I mean, do you expand a little bit in terms of your questions as to what are the people complaining about? What are the aspects of inequality that they are pointing to?
Yeah, well, it takes various forms. In some instances, unfair discrimination, for example, within schools, also unfair discrimination from the side of local governments, unfair discrimination in the health environment, but then also, as I indicated, under equality complaints, we also count complaints relating to various forms of hate speech. And we do believe that the political temperature sometimes gets so high in this country that unfortunately people forget about the fact that we should be a country united in our diversity and say things, also even sometimes, unfortunately, political leaders and so on, that they should rather have not said.
So, I mean, do we read into that? You're saying we are moving further away from that slogan or motto of saying we're united in our diversity. Are we then to believe that South Africa today is more divided than it was maybe in '94?
I think that would be difficult to make that assumption based on the complaints we receive necessarily, but we do think that more needs to be done, and it's also for that very reason that we will host this summit on racial polarization within the next few months. But I think what is important is that we have made great strides as a country as far as the realization of human rights is concerned. Obviously, the first and very important thing is the fact that we have a great constitution that is lauded for its progressiveness and contribution to the world. Furthermore, we have made very important strides as far as LGBTI rights are concerned. We also see progress in terms of the transformation of social assistance programs. We now have the child support grant, the old age grant, the disability grant. We have seen the promulgation of the Promotion of Equality and Prevention of Unfair Discrimination Act in 2000. That was a step forward. We've seen that same-sex marriage has been made legal from the 30th of November 2006. I think that we've made strides as far as access to education is concerned. Quality of education still seems to be one of those matters that need further attention. We now have, since 2007, no-fee schools throughout the country. And so these are the areas where we have made progress. There are some others as well. But as we have pointed out earlier, as far as inequality, we unfortunately in a position where we are seen as one of the most unequal countries in the world, with the gap between wealthy and the most impoverished not being closed, but actually widening. We also see that in terms of inclusive education, for example, there are still 600,000 children with disability that remain out of school. We really need to make better progress as a country. Yeah. We also see that as far as access to socio-economic rights like water and sanitation, there are still too many schools without water and sanitation. And we will be, there are 4 MECs that we will be subpoenaing soon because they did not respond to a very simple question we asked, and that is to identify the schools in their provinces.
How are we doing on social cohesion in our schools? I know you have been involved in a number of instances. For example, last year the Brackenfell Matric Ball High School issue, the Human Rights Commission was involved in that, and there have been other instances in our schools that relate to social cohesion. And what are we getting wrong there?
Yes, I think we have a situation where there are these incidents that flare up, and then we investigate and we come up with a report and certain findings, recommendations or directives. But it is an important question that we really need to get to the depth thereof, and that is why, as I indicated earlier, we will have a full inquiry this year concerning social cohesion and unfair discrimination in schools to get to grips more at a deeper level as to what exactly the issues are. Of course, the social cohesion issues come to the fore specifically when you have schools that are more integrated than other schools. And it is within that environment that we want to also give schools the tools to be able to drive social cohesion. For example, we want to develop a human rights sanctioned program on diversity and sensitivity training for schools.
Yeah. Now, 13% rise in complaints on the infringements. What is the rate of success in prosecuting, so to speak, these infringements, or at least getting some kind of justice for those who feel undone?
No, I think the success rate is quite good as far as that is concerned. All the complaints we receive that we assess and then come to the conclusion that we investigate. We do investigate them. We do come up with specific findings and directives or recommendations, or we mediate some of these matters if these matters are possible of being mediated, or in some instances we do have to go to court, unfortunately, but then we do that and we make sure that the necessary redress is there for those whose rights have been violated.
All right, Andre, I appreciate your time, and thank you very much for joining us tonight here on the Newsfeed Late Night. That's the Commissioner at the Human Rights Commission, Andre Gaum, talking about a rise in complaints, a 13% rise in complaints. But interesting to note that the most infringed right in South Africa, the right to equality.